This is CBC Vancouver News.
The primary cause of this collision is that we have a vehicle traveling the wrong way on the highway.
Nearly 24 hours later, a deadly crash in West Vancouver is still causing 3-hour sailing waits for BC Ferries passengers heading for Horseshoe Bay. Plus,
the savings that are going to be realized are of a significant magnitude.
cuts to the tune of $90 million. TransLink says it'll axe dozens of jobs and go after ferry evaders with significant funding shortfalls. Also,
we had an option to do this, and we chose this option, and it was absolutely the right thing to do.
Shipping people out of province is not an intended long-term consequence.
600 BC cancer patients have received treatment in Washington state in the past year. Critics say it's an indictment on our own medical system. Hello, I'm Tanya Fletcher. Thanks for joining us. 3-hour sailing waits continue for BC Ferries passengers tonight, 24 hours after a deadly crash in West Vancouver. Investigators are still trying to figure out how and why one car was traveling in the wrong direction down Highway 1 leading up to the crash. Police say a vehicle was heading east in the westbound lanes of the Trans-Canada near Westport Road when it collided head-on with another car just before midnight. 2 people were killed. 3 others were rushed to the hospital with serious but non-life-threatening injuries. Alcohol has been ruled out at this point, but officers are releasing few other details.
The circumstances that led up to that continue to be under investigation. Because of the significance of this event, we want to be absolutely certain that when we release what we believe to be a clear picture of the pre-collision events, that they are accurate.
The road closures have led to delays on the highway and at the ferries all day. Tonight's remaining BC ferry sailings from Horseshoe Bay have been 3 hours delayed. Well, tomorrow marks 2 years since 22 people were taken hostage in a bank in Saanich. It ended in a major shootout with police killing 2 suspects. But all of the hostages made it out alive and unharmed. As Michelle Gassoub reports, the officer who led that response that day is reflecting on his own recovery and the lessons learned.
June 28, 2022. Victoria Police Sergeant John Musico and 6 members of his tactical team got the call. 2 gunmen had taken 22 people hostage inside this Bank of Montreal. They had just moments to react.
I've had a couple of minutes worth of time to drive to the bank, and now I've had 60 seconds worth of time to develop a plan and respond to 2 armed gunmen exiting a bank.
The gunmen approaching the officers were brothers Matthew and Isaac Ochterlony. An RCMP investigation would later find they had no plan to steal money. Their goal, kill as many police officers as possible.
When we end up starting the takedown, one of the suspects ends up turning really quickly and starts shooting at us. So his rifle's coming up, the van starts taking fire, and from that point I can see my life basically like flashing before my eyes.
Musico shot his pistol directly through his van's windshield at the suspects. The shootout, captured on cell phone video, lasted 26 seconds, leaving 2 gunmen dead and 6 responding officers injured.
I was shot. 5 of my closest friends, who I also am responsible for supervising, have now been shot. 3 of them have like catastrophic, life-threatening injuries.
The officers were cleared of all wrongdoing in the deaths after a report from BC's police watchdog found they faced unbridled violence from the suspects. Musico was shot through his right foot.
Regardless of who they are or what their intentions were or what their actions were, they most likely have family members that love them or care for them. And those family members have now lost somebody.
He says the trauma of that day has lingered longer than his injury, but he'd do it all again.
We fulfilled our service that day, and we saved the lives of those hostages. And for me, I'm satisfied with that.
Investigators also concluded if Musico's tactical team hadn't been near the bank that day, many more lives could have been lost. Michelle Gassoub, CBC News, Vancouver.
TransLink has come forward with a series of what it calls efficiency measures to help ease a $90 million funding shortfall. The cost-cutting plan involves the elimination of up to 35 jobs and ramping up efforts to go after ferry evaders.
Coming out of the pandemic, we've really seen some issues in our revenue streams. Our fares we've kept lower than inflation. We have a fuel tax in place that with more EVs on the road, we're collecting less fuel tax. And so, and in addition, inflation is causing things to cost more. So all of that taken together, we've been able to offset using the provincial and federal relief funds.
Right.
But at some point that runs out.
TransLink says it is dealing with, yes, a drop in fuel tax revenue and fares priced below inflation, as well as those higher costs for labor, fuel, and maintenance. Roughly 600 British Columbians with breast or prostate cancer in BC have received radiation therapy in Bellingham, Washington over the past year. As Katie DeRosa reports, critics say relying on American treatment is an indictment of our own cancer system.
When Richard Miro's doctor told him he would get faster treatment for his prostate cancer south of the border, the 66-year-old jumped at the chance.
She asked me how I felt about going to Bellingham, and because the waiting list, I guess, was very long in Vernon or down that way for getting treatment. I said, well, let's go down there and get that done.
The elder from the Fort Nelson First Nation got 20 rounds of radiation over 4 weeks in February. Miro is one of the more than 600 patients who have traveled to one of 2 Bellingham cancer clinics for radiation therapy in the last year. Health Minister Adrian Dix says sending patients to Bellingham has reduced the waitlist size for radiation therapy in BC by 24%. He acknowledged, however, that more needs to be done. He says BC Cancer is hiring more oncologists so patients can be seen faster. While more people are receiving radiation therapy within the 28-day clinical benchmark, BC continues to have one of the longest radiation wait times in the country. That's unacceptable, says BC United's health critic, who noted the province has gone from having one of the best cancer care systems in the country to one of the worst.
It is very alarming to look at the circumstances in British Columbia today.
Miro said despite the 10-hour journey to Bellingham, he has no regrets about his decision.
To go through that and have so many nice people, behind you and going, treating you like you're a person instead of just a client. It was just uplifting, like your spirit was uplifted.
Paul Adams of the Rural Health Network has been pushing for rural and remote cancer patients to have equal access to faster treatment in Bellingham. But he says the long-term goal should be getting treatment closer to home.
Shipping people out of province is not an intended long-term consequence.
CBC News asked BC Cancer and the Health Ministry for a breakdown by health authority of the 599 patients who received treatment in Bellingham. Those figures were not provided by Deadline. The BC government has budgeted $34 million a year for the program. Katie DeRosa, CBC News, Victoria.
Just in time for the long weekend, another potential strike by WestJet mechanics has been averted. Federal Labor Minister Seamus O'Regan has imposed binding arbitration to resolve the outstanding issues between the airline and the union. Ahead of possible job action, WestJet had gone ahead and canceled 25 flights. The company now says no further flights will be scrubbed, and the union says it will comply with the minister's order. Meanwhile, food and beverage workers at Vancouver International Airport staged a one-day strike today. The work stoppage comes after bargaining with their employers broke down. As Saurabh Sandhu tells us, this strike is another in a series of job action at YVR in recent years, all centered around fair living wages.
When do we want? Contract! When do we want it? Now! Dozens of workers picketed outside YVR's international arrivals Thursday morning, demanding fair wages.
We'll never be defeated!
These workers belong to a union representing some of those working at food outlets, also known as airport concession workers. The union, representing more than 200 workers, says 80% are women, many of them immigrants.
A lot of them work 2 jobs, because they can't make enough working a full-time job at one company. A lot of them almost sleep at the airport pretty well, and they just roll into their next job.
The workers are employed by SSP Canada, which operates 31 of the 41 food and beverage outlets at YVR. Today, 11 out of SSP's 13 locations at YVR are closed as a result of the strike.
There were negotiations up until yesterday. They did break off. There's a lot of frustration on the part of the workers about the level of how far the negotiations have proceeded.
In a statement, SSP Canada says it has negotiated in good faith and it hopes that parties can successfully conclude the negotiations as soon as possible. But workers like Elisa Richard are not convinced with what's being offered.
I work 8 hours a day. I'm speed walking constantly. Sometimes I can't even get a sip of water because I'm serving my guests. It's the highest turnover rate you could possibly imagine.
But this is not the first job action the Vancouver airport has seen in recent times. About 200 workers from 2 YVR hotels in Richmond have been on strike since last year, demanding better wages. And workers at another hotel in the area, Radisson Blue Vancouver Airport, have been on strike even longer, since May 2021. These striking workers are calling on YVR to do more for airport workers.
Airport concession workers are some of those lowest earning workers at the airport. And we think it's time for them to expand that policy so more workers are covered.
The airport authority says it doesn't play a role in the negotiations, but it encourages both sides to get back to the bargaining table. The striking workers say they look forward to returning to negotiation and will plan future job action if the demands are not met. Saurabh Sandhu, CBC News, Vancouver International Airport.
More than 600 HandyDART workers across Metro Vancouver have voted overwhelmingly in favor of strike action if necessary.
We don't want to go on strike, but what we need is to be able to feed our families, pay our rent, pay our mortgages, and not be constantly trying to catch up.
The union says after months at the bargaining table, they've reached an impasse with their employer. TransDev is a French company contracted by TransLink to operate HandyDART services ever since 2018. Both sides are set to resume negotiations July 15th. Over to Langford now, and City Hall has been shut down all day after a major flood caused significant damage. It was caused by a burst pipe affecting a big portion of the building. City officials are reminding residents that even with City Hall closed, property taxes are still due by July 2nd. They encourage people to pay with online banking instead. A report from a trade union group argues BC's construction sector is too reliant on temporary foreign workers. It says that's bad for local workers' wages and the rights of workers from abroad. As Liam Britton is finding out, one foreign worker echoes that call for better protections and a chance to become Canadian.
Temporary foreign worker Paul Velis came to Canada to build homes and a better life.
It's a lot of stress, for sure, because honestly, I like being here. I like doing carpentry, and I believe this country needs carpenters.
He was formerly on what's called a closed permit. That meant he had to keep his job with one employer or risk being forced from Canada. So he put up with what he called bad things.
I suffer economical abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, pretty much all the abuses you can imagine.
He has a new job and an open permit now, but wishes he had the opportunity to become a Canadian resident.
A clear path to permanent residency or citizenship for sure will be like stress relief for all temporary foreign workers, I would say.
Now, a new report argues that BC is going to need 52,000 more construction workers by 2032, and about 30% of them will need to come from abroad. The problem is, Canada's immigration system isn't bringing enough of those workers in, and those who are brought in tend to be temporary foreign workers who are precarious with fewer protections. The report is from the BC Building Trades Council, a trade union group. It argues employers are over-relying on temporary foreign workers, and that hurts local and foreign workers in the process.
they're able to bring in temporary labor at less than sort of market wages, bring down wages across the industry in BC. And at the same time, those migrant workers who are coming into our country as temporary foreign workers, they're being denied sort of the employment rights and protections that workers here should have.
Migrant workers advocate Raul Gatica says violations of these workers' rights is common because their job keeps them in Canada.
For example, the employer repeat them constantly to don't submit any complaint for work and compensation. For example, if they get a work accident, they don't have to say anything. They just have to be quiet and don't say anything. Otherwise, they will lose their job.
The Trades Council says the federal and provincial governments should bring in more foreign workers with a path to residency. And they want 2 foreign worker programs audited and to pause entry into construction jobs until that closer look happens.
I think that we need to be very cautious about seriously considering these proposals.
This economist argues temporary workers are needed to help build housing, although there could be reforms.
Those are the things that we should be talking about rather than restricting the ability of companies that need workers in the trades to actually bring those workers in, given that we are not training enough people in this country.
Canada's Immigration Ministry says Ottawa is working to improve compliance with terms of the Temporary Foreign Worker Program, adding over 50,000 skilled tradespeople across the country have become permanent residents over the last 5 years. And there are some avenues for temporary workers to pursue residency. Victoria says it is using its provincial nominee program to pursue immigrants in 35 construction and trades occupations for permanent residency. Velis hopes one of those paths to permanent residency is in the cards for him as he continues to build his bond with this country. Liam Britton, CBC News, Vancouver.
BC Hydro is offering $10,000 to homeowners looking to install rooftop solar panels. The company says the rebate program will be available starting next month, but Hydro first has to approve the equipment. Now, it plans to expand the program for apartment buildings, small businesses, social housing, and Indigenous communities as well, with rebates up to $150,000. One policy advisor we spoke with says this is a good start, but there's still more work ahead.
Putting solar on roofs is probably a relatively small part of the overall problem of electrifying power supply that BC Hydro is experiencing.
BC Hydro says the program will make it easier for people and businesses to generate their own electricity, as well as lower costs and deliver clean energy back to the grid. And still ahead, the NHL awards were handed out tonight, including some hardware for a couple of hometown guys. We'll have a recap after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Premier David Eby and his wife, Dr. Kaylee Lynch, have welcomed a new addition to their family. In a social media post, the Premier announced the birth of their daughter, Gwendolyn K. Eby, weighing 9 pounds 6 ounces. Eby went on to thank the nursing and hospital staff and says Gwen's name comes from her great-grandma, a longtime Victoria resident born on the prairies. Well, the NHL Awards took place in Las Vegas today, and 2 local guys picked up some hardware. Canucks captain Quinn Hughes won the James Norris Memorial Trophy as the league's best defenseman. The 24-year-old is the first Canuck to win the award. And North Vancouver native Connor Bedard was named Rookie of the Year, despite missing a chunk of the season with a broken jaw. Bedard was the #1 overall pick from the 2023 NHL Draft. And you're looking at a live shot of downtown Vancouver. Well, January is making a strong finish. We'll find out when more summer-like weather is set to arrive. Your 5-day forecast is coming up next.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox. CBC returns as a media partner of the Surrey Fusion Festival, July 20th to the 21st. The festival features over 50 cultural pavilions that will incorporate the theme of landmarks of the world into their displays. For more information, visit surreyfusionfestival.ca. And never miss a special programming series, event, or contest. Subscribe to CBC Vancouver's e-newsletter and keep connected with us.
The weather update is brought to you by Direct Buy Furnace. To cool and clean the air in your home, call Direct Buy Furnace. Installing Trane, the most reliable heating and cooling brand.
And time for a look at the forecast. Let's bring in our Darius Madavian. Darius, for once, we have some positive drought news, sounds like.
Yes, Tanya, I've been here for going almost a year now.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Marks 1 year. This is the first time I get to bring good drought news. This is a big day. As you can see here, if we compare this to where we were at last week, parts of the northeast have actually dropped out of drought level 4 and also 5 drought restrictions. Not the entire region, but this is the first time that we've seen parts of the northeast fall out of drought level 4 and 5 since basically the fall of 2022. Very brief week or two at the beginning of last season, very beginning, where we had those slightly lower drought restrictions, but jumped right back up because of that June heat wave. Whereas this year, we've had that June, mostly a cool and wet June for the most part. So I know it's not the summer weather many people are hoping for, but it is making a difference in terms of the drought situation. So for me, at least, that somewhat makes up for the fact that it's been a little bit miserable. If we take a look here, you can compare this to where we were at last year, and across the whole province, but especially the northeast, we're seeing that improvement. So again, the cool, wet weather rather than the heat wave that we've got last year, making a difference here. Now, if we take a look at the fire danger, you'll see not entirely seeing that reflected in the fire danger, still high in many areas because we are still quite warm and sunny in some of these spots up in the northeast. That's not expected to change for the next couple days, but maybe some relief on the horizon as well. And also goes to show how quickly the drought situation can jump back up if we don't get that rain that we're looking for. The only reason I wanted to show this really briefly is to show that there will be some sunny breaks tomorrow in Metro Vancouver and across the south coast, but don't count on too much. It's still quite cloudy until we get into probably Sunday, Monday. In terms of the rest of the province, hopped right ahead. You can see lots of precipitation in many spots tomorrow, but should be some breaks. If we take a look at, there we go. If we take a look at temperatures now, all over the place. Temperatures across the province tomorrow, it's still quite cool in many spots, but temperatures start to recover over the next couple of days, sort of hopping around, maybe Sunday a little bit cooler again, but overall, generally speaking, close to seasonal, just fluctuating by 2 to 5 degrees or so. Conditions across the province tomorrow, lots of sunshine for many people, but also some storms and precipitation on the way. And if we zoom into Vancouver, a 5-day forecast looks quite the same as what we've seen recently. A little bit drier, though. Seasonal temperatures and maybe a little bit of showery activity on Saturday. Tomorrow, we should see a brief sunny period in the afternoon, or sunnier period. And then as we get later into the week, a little bit warmer and a little bit sunnier.
Not a bad long weekend, it looks like. Thanks, Darius.
Thank you.
And that is your late news for this Thursday, June 27th. For news anytime, anywhere, download the free CBC News app. You can always find us online. We're at cbc.ca/BC. Your next local newscast is on the early edition starting tomorrow morning at 5. Thank you for watching. Have a great night.